Hi, I finally found some time to record a little bit so that hopefully I can edit a vlog together for you. In terms of what I've been up to lately, it's the last 2 months before my book deadline, so that's really all I'm doing at the moment is just trying to get through the last little bit of drawing my book. And it has reached that point now where it's got to be a real slog. I'm kind of not enjoying it anymore. But, it does feel like the last stretch and it'll get there eventually. So, yeah, I've already started to plan how I'm going to kind of celebrate finishing, hopefully in early part of July. So I'll show you a little bit of drawing. Obviously, we're still kind of in lockdown in the UK. I'm not really going anywhere apart from going to the local shops every other week. My boyfriend goes once a week and I go once a week, so I go out every other week, and I do kind of occasional post office runs, and that's all I've been doing in terms of going anywhere. I've got some progress done on the garden, which has been quite nice. We've had some just stunning weather. Today it's actually pretty chilly, but I felt like filming out on the roof anyway, because I do quite a lot of filming in my studio, so this is always a nice bit of variety. All the leaves on the trees have come out now, which is really nice. That really improves the view of kind of down the back of our house, so we don't see the kind of flats at the back. I won't show you the garden just yet because I'm still working on it. I've been transferring loads of plants down from my roof garden, which is up here, down there. It occurred to me in the last episode that I said I was going to show you a photo taken from up here down into the back garden that showed how overgrown it used to be, and I completely forgot to put that in when I did the edit, so I'm going to show that to you now. I'm still doing quite a bit of cooking and baking and stuff. I'm really enjoying having the time for that. I never used to really like cooking all that much. I used to be one of those people that I didn't have a huge appreciation for food. I just kind of ate because I had to. But when I met my partner, Sergio, he's really, really into food. So he kind of taught me to really appreciate it. And through that, I got more into cooking. I filmed a few little bits of cooking and baking that I can show you. The other thing I've found that I've got more time for with not having to go to my part-time job is exercising. I've been exercising loads and I don't really enjoy exercising that much, but I do like that it makes me feel healthy. And at the moment I'm kind of exercising either 2 or 3 times a day. I alternate, so one day I do 2 exercise bike sessions of 25 minutes each, and then every other day I do that, plus I add a 15-minute kind of workout, like intensive workout on top of that, and I'm managing to keep that up, which is amazing. Usually I would be far too tired with having to go to work and finishing work in the middle of the night. That really takes it out of me. So I've been making the most, I think, of having this spare time to get that routine going, and I've been quite enjoying it. Oh, lovely. Sun's coming out. I was hoping this might happen. One thing I thought I could talk about a little bit for this episode is the part-time job I had that the current graphic novel I'm working on is based on. So when I finished my A-levels, which is age 18, I think, I applied to university and I got a place at Goldsmiths University, but I decided to defer for a year, and just have a year off kind of working, and just kind of, I've never been a huge fan of being in the education system. Like, it's always felt a bit kind of phony to me in a way, like there's a lot of nonsense that gets talked, and I've always more enjoyed being in the real world, kind of, working and meeting real people and stuff. So I very much wanted a year off before I started university. And what I did was I went around, I was living in Brighton at the time, and I went around applying for jobs that I could kind of do for a year before I started university. So I would have been 18, 19, I think. And the one that I got was ushering in a cinema. And the cinema was right on the seafront in Brighton. It was an amazing old Art Deco building that was kind of quite run down. Like, it was one of the cheapest cinemas in town. It might have been the cheapest. And it was a bit kind of grimy and grubby, but it was small. It had 3 screens. One was quite big and the other 2 were really small. And it had some really nice people working there. Something I've always loved about having jobs are the kind of range of people that you meet. This had a real range of interesting characters. And I don't think maybe I've put kind of one into the graphic novel I'm writing, but the other characters are all kind of made up of bits and pieces of people that I met through different jobs at different times of my life. But what was particularly great about the cinema job was motorbike noise. What was particularly great was that I did it for a year, and halfway through the year I had come up with this project with a friend of mine, Becky, who is a stage manager. She works in all the London theatres as a stage manager, and we were kind of interested in theatre work back then, and we hadn't got any experience, so we decided we would write to all the London theatres and ask for work experience, kind of volunteer to work for free for a month. And her dad lived in London, so we were planning to stay with him and just do a month of kind of work experience in whatever theatres we could get work in. So I wanted to keep the cinema job, so I contacted an old friend of mine, Roz, who I'd been at sixth form college with. I did my A-levels alongside her. She was a friend of mine in Brighton, and I said, I'm leaving this job for 1 month. I don't know if you're interested in kind of working there for a bit in my place. And she said she was, so she took that job. I went off to London and did my month's kind of fun theatre work experience. And when I came back, they had a place to keep Roz on. So I was then working with, one of my closest friends at the time. And there was a little group of us that were really good friends and hung out a lot. So when we were working and also when we were off, we kind of partied a lot because we were teenagers. And it was kind of a really fun year. It was my first kind of really independent year. So the jobs I ended up getting, the theatre jobs in London, I got 2. One was just a single week's work experience at the Donmar Warehouse, which is in Covent Garden, and it was assisting the stage management team on a production that was directed by Sam Mendes, or Mendes, never sure how you pronounce that. Becky and I were doing all the most mundane tasks that you could possibly imagine. The play was set in the 20s, so we had tasks like they needed a whole load of pencils. It was set in a newspaper office, and the pencils had to be bare wood because back in the 20s I don't think they had varnished pencils and they hadn't been able to find any to buy. So we had a big box of pencils that we had to sand by hand, sand all the varnish off so that they were down to the bare wood to make them kind of, accurate to the time period. The newspaper office was also filled with big stacks of newspapers, which needed to be fireproofed for legal reasons to be part of the set. So we had to take apart all these newspapers, fireproof the pages one by one, hang them up to dry, and then kind of reassemble them and make them into bundles to go on the stage. There was a lot of stuff like that. I remember having to go and get Sam Mendes his lunch one time, which made me quite nervous because I wanted to make sure I got it right. And the other stage management job we got for the rest of the month in London was working at the Battersea Arts Centre, which is in the kind of Clapham area. And it was really, really good fun. I'm just distracted because there's a cat chasing a magpie over there. But, the cat's on the roof and the magpie got away very easily because the cat's got nowhere to go. Anyway. Yeah, so Battersea Arts Centre, that was a really nice one because we were working on that production for the whole kind of run of the production, and we were assistant stage managers, which meant we helped source props during the rehearsal period, and then we helped run the show during performances. So we would be kind of in the wings, making sure that all the props were in the right place for the actors to use at different points in the show. And that show was The Sound of Music. And that was a whole lot of fun. And then my friend Becky went on and she does that as a career now, kind of full time, although obviously with all the theatres being closed, not so much at the moment. I grew up in London as a kid till the age of about 12, but that was the first time I'd been back kind of living there, and it was really exciting to be kind of working and independent and doing these exciting jobs, kind of travelling around London, picking up props for theatres and working with directors, and things like that. So that was really good. And then I had the fun of going back to my Brighton cinema job for the rest of the year. So yeah, it was a perfect kind of gap year job for a bunch of teenagers. The cinema itself wasn't very exciting. It was kind of a mainstream cinema. They just showed all the kind of blockbusters. I remember Titanic was the most, huge release that came out that year. Things like the first Men in Black came out that year. But there was a little bar next to the cinema which became our kind of local, and they showed films down there just on a projector on a little screen, which for teenagers they were kind of cool art house films. I remember seeing Naked Lunch down there. So we would kind of sneak out from our job during the day of ushering in the really crappy cinema and kind of sneak out and go and watch bits and pieces of these cool movies at the bar next door. It wasn't quite like it was such an easy job. We were completely left to our own devices. We weren't really supervised much. There wasn't a lot for us to do. So the manager didn't really care unless the screening was full and he wanted a member of staff in there. He didn't care whether we were in there or just hanging out chatting in the foyers. So sometimes what we would do is we would tell him we were going in to watch the film, and then we would just kind of sneak out one of the back exits, one of the fire exits, jam something in the door, like a little bit of newspaper or something, and then spend an hour and a half in the bar watching a different movie next door, and then come back for the end of the film and kind of clean up and then get ready for the next screening. The main difference with the ushering job I do now in the theatre is that I don't have to do cleaning, which thank goodness. There's a whole team devoted to housekeeping there. Because in the cinema we had to clean up in between every screening and just pick up people's food and drinks they'd spilled on the carpet. It was really grim, but that was the worst thing about the job. Apart from that, it was really easy and it was really fun, and it's a year I'm really glad I spent doing what I did. And a few things have kind of, mainly the setting of that building on the seafront, have fed into the graphic novel I'm working on. Not so much kind of any incidents or characters, but it's just the kind of atmosphere of the seaside town and the kind of crumbling building that used to be quite grand back in the day and is now kind of semi-derelict. So I can't wait for that book to come out at the end of the... Oh, battery's low. I better wrap this up. I can't wait for that to come out at the end of the year and for you to be able to have a look and see what I've been working on. Just a little disclaimer about this episode of the vlog. My iPhone kind of died. Didn't really die, but the battery started to swell up and it, created a bit of an issue. So that's been sent off for repair at the moment. So I'm using an old iPhone. I don't know if it'll make a huge amount of difference to the quality, but if it does, that's why. Then also my iPad got completely full because I'm drawing my entire graphic novel on Procreate on there. And the iPad I had was a little bit limited in size. So just in the last week, I've had to switch iPhone and iPad and set up new devices. So that's what's been going on for me during this week. I was also really lucky in that my partner Sergio also has an iPad. It has a lot more storage, and he was happy to kind of just switch with me, considering that I use mine for work and he just uses his for reading and stuff. So yeah, very lucky that that was an easy fix. I've come into the studio today. It's still a little bit chilly, and also I realised there are a few things I'd forgotten to update you on yesterday. First of all, my knitting project. So this is where I've got to with it. Really enjoying this, but I'm not actually finding a huge amount of time to knit at the moment with trying to finish my book, so it's just a kind of ongoing when I have a moment, or if it's a nice day and I can kind of sit outside for an hour on the roof and do a bit of knitting, I'm doing that. The other thing that I forgot to mention when I was recording yesterday is that I started a podcast. Probably a lot of you will have spotted that already, especially if you subscribe to this YouTube channel, because I've been posting them on here. But just in case you haven't noticed, I started a podcast that I think the third or the fourth, I'm not even sure, episode has just gone up. I'm doing them weekly and they're about 20 minutes long each. And what I decided to do was, I was listening to a podcast made by a friend of mine that I work with at the theatre, who's a writer, and out of kind of not having a job to go to and wanting some creative kind of direction and purpose during the lockdown, he decided to start just going through his old notebooks and reading out bits of writing as a podcast and recording that. And I was really enjoying hearing his writing, and as I was listening and really enjoying it, I suddenly thought, well, I've got these journals which are from my trip around Mexico and Central America when I was 25, the trip that I used as the inspiration for my book, Follow Me In, my graphic novel. And I kind of thought, early on when I was planning the graphic novel, I wondered whether to include the Central America part of this trip as part of the narrative. In the end, the editor and I decided not to. We thought we would just do Mexico and end the story there. And I've kind of written about some bits and pieces of the Central America part of this trip in my zine, Cat Zine, which is on sale in my Etsy shop, which I've recently reopened. I've only got a limited range of stuff on sale at the moment, just because I don't want to be doing huge numbers of post office trips at the moment. So I've just got my book and my zines on sale right now. But I'd never really written in great length about the second half of that trip, which was from Guatemala to Panama City. We spent 6 months traveling Mexico and then 3 months crossing Central America and flying out to Panama City at the end of the trip. And I've got these detailed journals, so I thought what I would do is kind of record myself reading the Central America part, which is not covered in my graphic novel, so that for anyone that read the book and was curious about what happened next, they would be able to find out. I really enjoyed doing it because I hadn't read these in probably over a decade. I'd reread the Mexico part as research for sort of planning my book, but I hadn't read the Central America part. And in fact, one of the books, I think it's this one here, had been kind of missing for ages. I'd been kind of aware at the back of my mind that I hadn't seen it. I had 3 of the notebooks together and one was missing, and I knew it was the one that covered most of the Central America part of the trip. And I was kind of feeling sad about that because I don't have digital versions of these backed up anywhere or anything like that. So I was kind of thinking, oh, it's a shame I've lost all that stuff, and I don't remember a huge amount from that part of the trip. You know, I only have the broadest strokes of the trip kind of in my head, in my memory, and I was kind of sad that I didn't have that important part of the journal. And I kind of thought to myself, well, if I can't find that, then I won't be able to do this podcast, obviously, because I won't have anything to read or talk about. And I thought I'll just have a look on these bookshelves behind me and just see if it happens to be there somewhere. And I didn't have a lot of hope because I thought, you know, if it was around, it would have been with the other 3. And I went to the bookshelf and just found it immediately, which I was so happy about. It was literally the first thing that I put my hands on. And so I was really excited and sat down to kind of record immediately. So yeah, I've been really enjoying doing that. If you haven't listened, you can listen via my YouTube channel. So if you subscribe to this, you should be getting the podcast as well. Or if you have a podcast app that you like to use, It should be on all of the big ones. If there's a podcast app you use and you don't see my podcast on there, let me know and I'll try and sort that out. But it's called Cat Central America Podcast, so if you search for that, you should be able to find it. So yeah, this is what I've been reading from. This was the first notebook. This was the one I took with me, and I bought this before the trip to start my journal. I took this and a blank sketchbook, and then throughout the course of the trip I kind of would run out of space to write and buy new books from papelerias in Mexico and Central America, which are stationery shops. And these are kind of children's exercise books, which I love. I don't know whether I got these two at the same shop or what, but they both have this kind of rad cycling motif going on, this kind of airbrushed artwork, which is pretty cool. But because they're kids' exercise books, they have things like multiplication tables on the back. This one has a little page in the front where you can kind of fill in your name, and it's got your class schedule on there. So I filled in my name and just put Katrina's Third Journal of Central America. So yeah, if you listen to the podcast and you want a visual, this is what I've been reading from. I've been kind of trying to not let that project infringe on the hours that I'm spending finishing my book, so it's been a strictly kind of evenings and weekends project, and it's been really fun. So if you've been listening, thank you very much, and please leave comments and things. I love to kind of hear what people think. So yeah, I don't usually say this, but liking and subscribing videos and stuff on YouTube is really helpful in terms of your visibility. So if you enjoy this vlog, please consider subscribing if you haven't already, and give it a like or leave a comment. Yeah, as I said, I love hearing what you think about the episodes. So thanks for watching and listening, and now I'll show you some of the stuff that I've been doing this month.
Well respected, having earned an Oscar nomination for his work at Fast Food Company, and had previously worked with Joe Hogan on Soldiers of War. In the Midwest, spent his early childhood in Germany and went to high school in San Antonio, Tech, Broadway, working with, among others, Otto Preminger. He eventually became a member of the Actors.
Come out this morning to post a letter. It's 8 a.m. It's lovely and quiet, and it was supposed to be cloudy today, but it's really lovely, so I'm going to show you some of the blossom that's around. So far I've only passed 2 or 3 people. It's really nice at the moment to see all the leaves coming out on the trees in London. People have planted geraniums in the top of the street sign. some parakeets out this morning. Oh, there's some calla lilies over here. Yesterday we made tamales for the first time at home, which was really, really exciting. We found a lot of kind of conflicting suggestions on how it should be done, so it was kind of intimidating a little bit to go into, but we were really happy with how they came out, and we're going to make them again today, so I'm going to vlog that for you. Here are my corn husks that they're wrapped in. These are actually the same ones that we used yesterday. We washed them after cooking the tamales and dried them, and we don't know whether you're really supposed to reuse them or whether that's a bad idea, but it seemed crazy to use them once and throw them away. So I'm just going to soak these. You soak them for an hour in hot water before you make the tamales to get them kind of more pliable. So I'm going to do that now. Here's my little bit of tamale dough. That's made with maize flour, stock, salt, a little bit of baking powder, and it's not quite the same as tortilla dough. It's got more kind of flavorings in it, and then we put a little layer of this inside the corn husks, and then a filling made of these chilies here. Off the top of my head, I've forgotten what these are called, so I'm going to put it up here so that you can see after I've consulted Sergio. But these are tinned chilies from Mexico, and we stuffed our tamales with these and with a little bit of cheese, and they were really delicious, and steamed them. So I'll show you the rest of that process in a second. When I was talking about the masa earlier, the Masado, I forgot to say that it also includes quite a bit of fat, and that's why it's so tasty. So traditionally you use lard. We're using a mixture of butter and coconut oil. What you're looking for is kind of a spreadable texture, a little bit like peanut butter. And you don't want it to break apart when you spread it, so I think that's still breaking a little bit. I found I've had to add a lot more liquid than the recipe suggested, but this is how we did it yesterday and it seemed to work okay. Today we're going to try and get rid of this dead ivy here, or as much of it as we can reach. Just got these out of the oven. Another babka, this one is double the size of the last one, and a few little brioche rolls with the leftover enriched dough. This one really came out well. It's so beautiful. Hi everyone, I thought I'd film a bit more baking for you during this quarantine. It seems to be something I'm doing a lot now that I have a bit of extra time. Today I'm making cannelle, which are I'd never know whether to call them a French pastry because they're made out of a kind of batter rather than a pastry dough, but they're a French dessert, and they're kind of little small bite-sized things made with rum. They're really delicious. and I have to make the batter today and then make the actual cannelle tomorrow, so I'll show you the different stages. First thing I need to do is bring some milk to a simmer in a saucepan. And I'm supposed to add vanilla pods, which I don't have, so I'm just going to use vanilla extract. While that's coming to a simmer, I'll show you the moulds that I use to make these. There's a very fancy kind of copper mould that is the official way to make these, but I have it on good authority from French people that I know that that's not necessary. You can get away with these, and mine have always come out really nicely, so this is what I use. They're also easy because they're kind of squishy, very easy to get out of the mould. It's getting there. Once the milk reaches a gentle simmer, you need to let it sit for 2 minutes. And in the meantime, we can make the rest of the batter ingredients. Just melted some butter in the microwave, and I'm going to be whisking together butter, sugar and egg. 1 whole egg and 1 egg yolk. This is my sugar. I've got 1 egg and 1 yolk. Now what we have to do is add a little bit of the hot milk into this and keep mixing, and add that gradually. And then we also add in a little bit of the flour as well and keep mixing it together gradually so that you end up with a really smooth batter. And I think the reason the milk has to be hot is that there's some reaction with the egg where it makes a kind of custard texture. That has to be right. Adding the flour. So here's my batter. The last thing I've got to add is 2 tablespoons of rum. So all that happens now is I'm going to put this in the fridge. You can leave it there for up to 4 days, apparently. I'm going to leave it overnight, and then tomorrow afternoon probably get these in the oven. Might do it in 2 batches, we'll see, because it can last up to 4 days in the fridge. Because the thing with cannelle is that they are definitely best eaten straight out of the oven on the first day. They're perfectly fine the next day. They have a kind of crispy outer shell and a really soft custardy inside. And what happens if you eat them, the day after cooking is that the crispness of the outside has kind of softened a bit. It's still delicious. It just doesn't have the contrast of textures that make them so lovely. So for these, I'm using a mixture of flour. I've got some double O Italian flour that I've been experimenting with recently, and I wanted to try that for the cannelle, but then I read that the recommended flour is plain flour or bread flour, which made me think maybe I should mix a little of my bread flour and the double O. So I've done a 50-50 mix. We've been researching double O flour. It's very confusing. It seems to have a lot to do with the fineness of the grind of the flour. This is very, very fine. It's also often has something to do with protein content. This is the stronger the flour, the higher the protein. And also something to do with ash content, which I have no idea what that means. But my experiments with the double O so far, I've made some brioche, a chocolate babka, and some pizza base dough. It worked especially well. It worked well with all of them, but especially the pizza base. It's got a really kind of fine texture, but it was really sturdy as well. So it wasn't quite as floppy as when I've made pizza bases with bread flour. So that was interesting. So we'll see how these compare to the last lot of cannelle that I made. This is only my 3rd time making it, hence why I'm checking the recipe quite often to make sure I don't make any mistakes. So yeah, the batter is just going to go in the fridge until tomorrow, and then we'll I'll show you the rest of it tomorrow. Okay, day 2 of making cannelle. I have to re-whisk my batter for about 2 minutes before I put it into the molds, and I've also got to oil the molds a little bit. I've got the oven preheated really hot, and then these are going to bake for actually kind of close to an hour. You do about 15 minutes on quite a high temperature, turn it down a little bit, and then do another 40-45 minutes. So let's get the whisking 2 minutes done. You've got to leave a little bit of space at the top of each mould for it to expand, but I've found that you don't need quite a centimetre, a little bit under is okay. These are going to go in at just over 200 degrees for 15 minutes. The general strategy with baking these is that you bake them at a very high temperature for the initial 15 minutes and then drop it. My oven doesn't really get that hot. It's very old and the seal isn't very good, so just over 200 is about as hot as it will get, and I found that these work absolutely fine. So that's it. I'll show you what it looks like when we get them out of the oven. Hopefully they've worked. Annoyingly, I've got this little bit left over, so I have to decide whether I'm going to throw that out or bake some more. But it would seem a little crazy to have the oven on for an hour just to bake maybe 2 cannelle, so we'll see. So now it's time to take the cannelle out of the oven. I've remembered to turn my kitchen light on this time, so sorry if the last little segment was a little bit dark. The cannelle look okay. They don't look like they've risen quite as much as they usually do. I wonder if it's because I used quite small eggs and the recipe says large. But they look good. The thing with cannelle is you're supposed to bake them to the point where they're almost burned, and that's always a tricky thing to gauge. They're supposed to be really crispy and crunchy on the outside, and it's slightly burned in places is okay. And they look like they're getting there now after about 40 minutes, so I'm gonna have a little look and see. They look pretty good. Yeah, they're slightly flat, but let's turn them out and see. Yeah, they're not bad. They're not quite as good as the last couple of times, but I'll let you have a little close-up. Now you're supposed to let them sit on the rack and cool for 2 hours before you eat them. I think maybe that helps give them a really crispy outer crust. Delicious. Decided to use my leftover batter to make a couple of experimental pancakes. Excuse the noise of the coffee machine. They're slightly odd, but they're really delicious, so that's a good way to use up leftover batter. I had to add a bit of flour to thicken it up, but apart from that, it looks pretty good and it tastes good too.